40-year-old man has been charged with manslaughter after the death of his grandson in Thorold. Brian Matthews was arrested today and scheduled for a bail hearing in St. Catharines. The charge is related to a 911 call from a home on Thorold Town Line Road in Thorold on Saturday, July 25th. Police responded to a report of a 13-month-old child in medical distress. Kody Smart was taken to hospital in St. Catharines before being transferred to McMaster Children's Hospital in Hamilton the same day. Kody died the next day.
Hi, Brian. My name is Lisa Isherwood. Nice to meet you. Brian Matthews, right? I am a police officer and a detective for the Niagara Regional Police. I'm not into formal titles or anything here, so feel free to call me Lisa if you want. What do people normally call you?
Brian.
Brian? Is it all right if I call you Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, Brian. Just to let you know, we are in a police facility, so everything's being audio and video recorded. Okay, it's just to make an accurate recording of everything that we talk about. It is, like, you are in custody, but if you need to use the washroom, I don't want you to think you have to sit here and hold it. Just say, Lisa, I need to use the washroom, and I'll have somebody bring you back downstairs. Okay? Have you had a chance to have something to eat today? No? Okay. Are you hungry? Did you have anything to eat before you came in here?
No.
Okay. Well, I do have water here, bottle of water, help yourself. If you do need something to eat, we do have food we can bring in for you. I had breakfast before I came in, so I just don't want you sitting here being hungry if you need something to eat.
Fine.
Okay? Now, I understand that your lawyer brought you in here this morning? Okay. What charge did they tell you that you were under arrest for?
Manslaughter.
Okay. And do you know what that charge means?
It means that they think I killed my grandson.
Okay, but the definition, did anybody explain what the definition means? Okay. The Criminal Code of Canada, it's our big book, and it has all the different offenses and what the definition is and what the penalty is if somebody's convicted of an offense. So I'm sure you've heard the term first-degree murder before. Okay, so that means that someone has caused another person's death and that it was planned and deliberate. Okay, so there was intent to cause death. Manslaughter, it's still a very serious offense, and it's in the murder category, but that means that the person did not intend to kill the other person. Okay, so whatever unlawful act that they did commit, the person would have had to know that what they did would likely cause injury. Okay, and it's injury that's risking bodily harm. It's not just some trivial injury. It's not just going to be a bruise. Okay? Does that make sense? Do you understand what that means? Okay. Now, if a person is convicted of that offense in court, the maximum penalty for manslaughter is life in prison. And that's up to a judge to decide that. Now, if I use the term intentionally hurting someone, what does that mean to you?
Purposely doing it.
Perfect, exactly. It means it was done on purpose, and the person would have had to know that their actions would have caused injuries to some extent. Okay, do you understand that definition? Okay, so that's the reason that you're under arrest, is that Kody, your grandson, he was taken to the hospital with serious injuries on July 25th, 2015. Unfortunately, he didn't recover from those injuries, and he was pronounced the next day. You provided an explanation as to what happened to Kody while he was in your care. And the coroner and the police, they do an investigation, and they've determined that the injuries that Kody sustained were very severe. And the injuries that were discovered through the autopsy support that it was an inflicted injury.
How could it be inflicted, though? But it's not what happened.
Okay.
It wasn't inflicted.
Okay, just hang on a sec. I'm just telling you what the coroner's report is saying, okay? So no one believes that your intent was to kill Kody, but the belief is that you intentionally caused those life-threatening injuries, which ultimately led to his death. Okay, and that's why you've been charged with manslaughter. I just wanted to take the time to explain that to you, Brian, okay? Do you understand that? I know this isn't easy to talk about, okay, but I think it's only fair that I explain the information that we have and the reason why you're sitting here. And I'll also give you an opportunity if you want to tell me your side of the story as well. I think that's only fair. Okay, but I just want to make sure you understand this part first. So do you understand what I meant about?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding, we already talked about it, that you've spoken to your lawyer and that you came in this morning with your lawyer.
Yes.
There's something I want to go over with you as well. Let me give you a copy to read. These are just some cautions that I have to read to you. Okay, and there's Kleenex there, Brian, too, if you need it. Like I said, if you do get hungry, let me know. I have water there. Medication-wise, are you taking any medication for anything? Okay. Have you been prescribed anything by a doctor? What I mean by that is sometimes people are diagnosed with something, some kind of medical condition, and the doctor says, yes, you should take this prescription, and then some people don't bother to take it. Nothing at all? Okay, I'll take it back if you're done. Yeah, thank you. Are you done reading it? Okay. So you're on no medication right now? Okay. And how's your health been the last little while?
Fine.
How have you been holding up? I can imagine this is a pretty stressful situation for you. How's your Jacqueline holding up?
Shit.
Well, I'd like to take the time to explain why I'm talking to you, Brian. First of all, I want to make sure you understood that what you're under arrest for and that this is a serious allegation. You said you understood that. I want you to know it's not my job to find you guilty of anything, okay? That's not my job, okay? My job is to find out what the truth is, okay? I think it's only fair to give people an opportunity to tell their side of the story, because there's always two sides, sometimes three sides to a story, right? If you and I were outside and we saw an accident happen, you'd probably say what happened differently than I did, right? Because we're two different people and we're going to interpret things differently, okay? Now, I want you to know that I'm very focused on details as well. Every bit of piece of information is important. Okay? You can't put a puzzle together unless you have all the pieces, right? So even if you think it's a small thing and not important, it could be a huge part of this investigation. So I want you to keep in mind that there's a lot of information that I already do know, but there's also some information that I don't know, okay? I wasn't there. That's why I take the time to talk to people and try to get as much detail as possible from them. And like I said, I'm only here to get to the truth, all right? But I think it's fair for you to know, too, that this is a major investigation. So there's no limit to the resources that we use. And I'm only one person in a team of detectives that's involved. So we spend a lot of time talking to people and listening to what they say. We take statements from anybody that may have been involved in any way, right from the 911 operator who you made a phone call to, right up to talking to the forensic pathologist. And that's the person that determines the cause of death. And that person also prepares a very comprehensive report outlining his findings in great detail. So the reason I'm telling you this, because I think it's only fair that you know about the amount of resources that go into something like this, okay? Now, Brian, I explained to you why I'm talking to you. The most important question I can ask you right now is on Saturday, July 25th, 2015, did you plan and deliberately kill your grandson, Kody?
No.
Okay. On Saturday, July 25th, did you intentionally cause those injuries to Kody that ultimately led to his death?
No.
Okay. So I've just asked you those very important questions, okay, and you've answered no to them. So you're denying inflicting any injuries on Kody. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it's very important that I get a detailed description of everything that happened that morning. Now, I know you've talked to a uniformed officer that came to the house that morning. I know you talked to a detective later at the hospital. Both of them asked you what happened. I realize at that time that's a very stressful time. You have a lot going on in your head. Your mind was probably racing. But now you've had some time has passed by, and you've had time to grieve. So I think it's important that I know what happened. So I would like you, if you're willing, to take me through that day and tell me exactly what happened.
I'm not making any statements.
Okay, and that's your right. You don't have to talk to me, but you can make the choice. You can decide whether to talk to me and make a statement or decide not to, okay? If you do decide to, it's just very important that I get as much detail as possible, okay? So timelines for us are very important as in investigations, and I've made a timeline of those few days based on the statements that you've already given, but there are some gaps in those timelines, okay? Like I said, your mind was probably racing then. You didn't, didn't think of all the details that we might need. So that's why I was going to ask you to just tell me about what happened on that day and take me through as much detail as you can.
Maybe can I still talk to my lawyer?
Okay. And you had an opportunity to speak to your lawyer, right?
Briefly.
Okay. Well, there are some questions that I would like answered, just to fill in some of those gaps in that timeline that I talked about. On that morning, in the statements that I listened to, there wasn't anything about the morning routine about how you waking up and then the children waking up, because I understand Carol was there as well. So can you fill me in on that part about the routine when the kids wake up, in particular when Kody woke up that morning?
I get up, change them, feed them, clean up, and then they play.
Okay, do you recall what time you woke up that day? Okay. What time did Kody wake up? And how do you know that Kody was awake then?
Because he's making noises in his crib.
And what kind of noises?
Just chattering.
And what do you do when he wakes up?
Get him up, change him, give him his breakfast.
So he, obviously he's in a diaper, right? 13 months, yeah. Was Kody crying when he woke up? And the other gap I had was about Carol. Do you know what time Carol woke up? And which one woke up first?
I don't remember.
Okay. I know it's hard. It's a long time ago. And it's a very stressful, upsetting subject to talk about. And you've had to deal with this for a few months now.
Of course it's stressful. I didn't do anything wrong, and you guys are fucking charging me.
Well, we're charging you based on the medical evidence that we have, which I'm going to talk about with you as well. Has anybody talked to you about what the medical records say?
No.
Okay. What about Taylor? What time did Taylor wake up that morning?
No.
When did you first see Taylor? Did you see Taylor, did Taylor see Kody before he left that day?
I don't remember.
And I know Taylor left the house, but do you know where he was going that day?
To work.
So when he left, when was the next time you saw Taylor? Did he come back before the paramedics showed up?
No.
Okay. Now that morning there was some text messaging between Jacqueline and yourself. My understanding is Jacqueline had to go to work that morning. At 9:44, Jacqueline sent a text message that asked you, is Kody crying? Can you explain to me why she would ask that? I'm sorry, did you say no?
Yes.
Like you don't want to explain or you don't know?
I'm not going into detail about anything without my lawyer.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry.
no, you don't have to apologize to me. What the right is that you have is to talk to a lawyer, okay? And you've had that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's no right to have a lawyer here while we're
I
talking.
understand.
Okay, all right. You mentioned talking to a lawyer. What did you not? Why do you want to talk to your lawyer now?
Sorry, I'm not making any statements.
Okay.
That's what I meant, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I just want to make sure. I know he brought, your lawyer brought you in, so that's what I just wanted to make sure about. Well, you say we're charging you. Yes, we're laying the charge as police officers, as investigators, but obviously to lay a charge, we have to have evidence, okay? Mm-hmm. And in this case, the coroner's involved, also known, he's a forensic pathologist, and they have to do the investigation regarding the medical evidence. So the medical evidence is presented to the police, and the police have to take that evidence, medical evidence, on top of everything else they've learned in the investigation and decide from there. The medical doctors who examined Kody prior to and after his death, they're the ones that are going to be presenting the medical evidence at court, okay? I've already asked you if you know anything about the medical evidence. You said no. So I would like to do that with you. I have the reports with me. I want you to know, though, I'm not a medically trained person, and there's a lot of medical jargon in here, but we can go through it. So you know that Kody was first taken to the St. Catharines General, right? So there would be an examination there. From there, he was taken to McMaster Children's Hospital. And there's a unit there that's called the Child Advocacy and Assessment Program. It's called CAP. Have you heard that term before? Okay. They deal with suspected child abuse incidents, and they do the medical examinations. So the doctor that was there was Dr. Nura Hayasa. And what they do is they take all the information. So what they do, they had the medical records from the Niagara Health System, the medical records from McMaster's Hospital from that morning, any other assessments that have done previously, but there weren't any involving Kody. Any information provided by fax, Kody's medical records from his family doctors, and then any information provided by the police. So from that, they put together this report. So first they review the medical records from St. Catharines. They list the what was in the examination there. Kody exhibited different signs. In addition to his comatose state, were indicative of severe increase in intracranial pressure. Okay, so that's pressure on the brain. So then they talk about what they did at McMaster's Hospital. So Kody presented with brain swelling, increased intracranial pressure and brainstem herniation, as well as reduced brainstem function. He subsequently developed evidence of multi-organ dysfunction, including heart, kidney, and liver impairments. So it goes on talking about how the organs respond to that. Actually, all the records from the family doctor. I understand Jacqueline was taking Kody to have some different medical examinations, but everything indicates his weight and physical growth was normal. He had some iron deficiency, but that was discussed with some dietary changes. And there was an optometrist that actually saw Kody in May, and Kody's retinas and everything else was normal, so there was no issues with his eyes. So this describes on July 25th when Kody was in the actual physical examination. So they list all the different areas that they check. They do laboratory tests, so they take blood and fluid samples. So they did an MRI. There was also tracking of the hemorrhage into the spinal canal, involving most of the spinal canal being thickest in the lumbar region. Abnormal signal was also noted in the first, second, and third thyroidic vertebrae, suggestive of trauma. And there's also suggestion of bilateral retina hemorrhages, trauma that induced separation of retinal areas. That was explained to me. That means like torn retinas. Have you heard of that before? Mm-hmm. Detached retinas. So that's in the eye. So we're talking about in behind the eye are all these different layers of skin, and those were at this point. This is before Kody's pronounced. At this point, they believe there's some hemorrhaging in behind the eyes, leaning towards detached retinas. They do a skeletal survey. There was no fractures identified. There was abnormal signals in between a couple vertebrae seen on the MRI, which are indicative of trauma. Ophthalmology, again, they saw hemorrhaging in behind the eyes, which were too numerous to count. You actually have 4 quadrants in the back of our retinas. I didn't know that, but all 4 quadrants were damaged. Neurosurgery documented, this neurosurgeon here documented the opinion that Kody had suffered a devastating brain injury and that the explanation for the injury that was available at the time was insufficient to account for it. He indicated that no surgical intervention could alleviate Kody's difficulties. So then they form an opinion. Kody was found to have a severe cerebral edema, which means swelling of the brain, extensive subdural hemorrhages, and severe bilateral retinal hemorrhages, which is what we just talked about, the detached retina. And there was evidence on an X-ray and MRI of injury to the upper thoracic vertebrae, which is the vertebrae up near the base of the brain. So then it goes on to explain what these different meanings, cerebral edema, a swelling of the brain, and then it explains what that means, how that works. So in the injury to the brain, it progresses over minutes, then into hours. Symptoms can include headache, lethargy, vomiting, seizures, and varying degrees of reduced consciousness to coma. And they explain as the brain swells, it fills the fixed space within the skull, and then the pressure increases on the brain tissue, which leads to further impairments of brain function and further reductions in level of consciousness. And then this brain swelling releases chemicals, which they find when they take blood tests. And then continued swelling results in the brain being pushed further through the available opening at the base of the skull, causing the function of the brainstem and ultimately brain dead. So that's what happens in that kind of traumatic brain injury. So then they give different reasons why a person could be suffering swelling in the brain. So there could be an infection in their body, there could be some kind of electrolyte or metabolic disorder. There could be some kind of oxygen-deprived injury, and then it goes into trauma. So even though these reasons can cause swelling of the brain, because of the investigation, it eliminates these reasons. So that's not why Kody had the swelling of the brain. Okay, he didn't have an infection, he didn't have a normal whatever.
What was it from then?
Pardon me?
Then what was it from?
That's what I'm getting at here. So the other reason they look at is trauma. So if it's not a medical reason, the next thing they look at is trauma. So when the cells of the brain are traumatized and injured, a complex series of biochemical and physiological reactions occur. Fluid from between the cells flows into the cells, resulting in swelling and cell dysfunction. This can happen in localized areas of the brain or in the brain as a whole, depending on the mechanism of injury. So in addition to causing impaired consciousness, brain cell dysfunction resulting from inflicted trauma can cause infants and young children to breathe very slowly or stop breathing altogether.